Hi, this is Dave Stevens again. Last time I spoke about how we document income and what kind of documentation we need in order to file the petition. Today I want to talk about the assets and how we value those and what kind of assets we're looking for. In a bankruptcy petition, we're looking for all the assets of the debtor, tangible, intangible, whether they can be liquidated, sold, whether they're in the hands of somebody else or in the hands of the debtor. And when I sit down with a client, I have a worksheet which I go through. And you can get this if you like, just email me and I'll send you a copy. But generally, it's much easier to sit down face to face and go over it because there's a lot of times there's questions that come up and some dialogue that needs to happen in order for us to get the right kind of information. So I'm going to go through this now, and you can go through it online if you like and complete it and bring it in with you when we get together. That would be helpful, save us some time, but at the end of the day, I'd like to sit down and discuss it one-on-one as well. But what we're looking for, of course, is well, let me begin by saying that we have to disclose all the assets. Now, that doesn't mean that any of these assets go to creditors. Why we're going through this is to make sure that we're trying to protect all the assets, and if we can't, then protect as much as we can. Most cases, there's none of these assets are going to be affected by the bankruptcy, and that you keep them and continue to use them and do just as you were before. But disclosure is key. We need to disclose everything, and you need to make sure to disclose everything to me so we can protect what we can protect and decide if we need to take a different course of action if we can't protect everything. So as I'm going through this worksheet, I'm looking for estimated values. I'm not looking originally for an appraisal. Most of the time we don't need an appraisal. Most of the time just the debtor's opinion of what the value is sufficient. Sometimes if it's more complicated, then we do get an appraisal. If the creditor objects to valuation, we'll have a hearing. We'll have competing appraisals, and the judge will decide at the end of the day what the true value is. But for the purposes of the worksheet, I'm looking for today, what do you think the value of these assets are? And as things change, we can amend this. So I usually start with cash on hand. When cash on hand is not money in the bank, but it's cash that you may have in your wallet, in your pocketbook, buried in the backyard at home, the total cash on hand. And oftentimes people say, I have no cash, that's why I'm here. Well, everybody has some cash on them. You can go buy a cup of coffee, have some cash. It doesn't matter if it's $1. We just need to disclose it. And again, this is going to change. So on the day we file the petition, we'll go through this again, and we'll make sure that at that time, this is an accurate reflection of what the assets are on the day of the file of the petition. And then I'm looking for money that's actually in the bank and financial accounts. Checking, savings, credit union accounts, whether that's in just the debtor's name, whether it's joint with another party. And we want to know where the money's held and how much is there and what type of account it is. Security deposits would be, if a landlord has a security deposit for rent, or if you put money down to lease a vacation home this summer. Security deposits are money that is yours that's being held by somebody else. Which brings up an important point. I also am going to want to know if there's any security deposits that you're holding on to that belong to somebody else. For instance, if you rent an apartment, you're holding on to a security deposit. That's something we want to know now. Not that it's an asset in this bankruptcy case, but if it's not being held in a separate account, it could bring up issues of, with the tenant later on. So we want to talk about that if that's the case. Household goods and furnishings. I'm talking about the TV, microwave, bedroom set, all the furnishing in the house. We want to get a general idea of what the value of those assets are. I usually give the example that if we're going to have a yard sale tomorrow, it's going to be a bright sunny day outside, everything had to go in your house, what would be the value of those assets? And please, your opinion is fine. We don't need to get an appraisal. You don't need to itemize every piece of furniture you have, but just generally think about it, have an idea what you think the value is. If it's a number that is reason for concern, we'll talk about it more. And sometimes we do actually have an appraisal go out there, but rarely is that the case. And then I'm going to want to know about certain collectibles. If you have a stamp collection, a baseball card collection, books, artwork. I once had somebody with a a Hummel collection that was surprisingly worth quite a bit of money. So we want to know, what kind of collectibles you may have, and again, an approximate value. In the case of artwork, sometimes that gets more complicated, and we do have an appraisal done of any particular item that's significant worth. Clothing, yes, we do have to value your clothing. Assume again you're at a yard sale, it's a bright sunny day out, and somebody wanted to buy your clothes. What's the value of your clothes? Some people it's very little. Other people, surprisingly, it's quite a bit. We need an idea of generally what the value of your clothing is. Again, if these assets are not so much clothing, but bank accounts, if they're joint, we want to know if they're joint. If there's a art on the walls, it's husband and wife, it's usually joint property. If only one person is filed for bankruptcy, then we're only interested in that one person's interest in that property. Jewelry, self-explanatory, watches, rings, earrings. People usually say, I don't have any, but they show up with rings on. So think about what jewelry you have. Give me an approximate value of what you think the value is. And if it's of significant value or there's certain items that need special attention, we'll look more into it. But I rarely ever put down zero, because at some point we're going to be going in front of a trustee, and sure enough, that person that put down zero, they're going to show up with some necklace on that's worth almost nothing. But again, if you put zero and you have something, it's a problem. Firearms, sports equipment, hobby equipment, golf clubs. Oftentimes people will have rifles and pistols. Usually general descriptions are fine, and estimated values are fine. Then we want to know about life insurance policies. Really, the trustees are looking for whole life insurance policies. Whole life is the type that you can borrow against, the type that's actually worth something today, not just if you pass away. We want to know about policies that the debtor owns, not just ones that are a beneficiary, but ones that they actually own. And if it's a whole life insurance policy, they want to know what the actual cash value is. If you had to go cash it in today, what is it worth? And again, I know I said it before, I'll say it again, that all this property can be protected. The Bankruptcy Code allows us to protect a certain value in any property that the debtor has. And those exemptions are usually pretty generous. So we can protect, in most cases, everything someone has. And in those circumstances where we can't protect 100% of the equity in any property, then we're just talking about filing a different kind of bankruptcy. Instead of filing Chapter 7, we may file a Chapter 13 or a Chapter 11, where we can protect those assets. Annuities, stocks, bonds, IRAs, 401ks, educational IRAs, Roth IRAs. Want to know who the providers are, how much is in those accounts. Retirement accounts are generally not property of the estate, so it's something that is not going to have any impact on the bankruptcy. It could be $1 million in your retirement account, and in all likelihood has nothing to do with the bankruptcy. Stocks in the company, interest in partnerships or LLCs. We'll talk more about whether, if you own a business, how that's treated. But for the purpose of valuation of assets, we just want to know, if you own stock, how much stock. If you own a share of LLC, what percentage of that LLC do you own? And later on, we'll get more information about the different businesses. We're going to need a valuation for that interest you have in a business as well. For a stock that's traded on the market, that's easy, but for an interest in an LLC that maybe isn't doing anything, that's probably zero. In most cases, someone's membership interest in an LLC oftentimes is zero. And this is where one of those occasions where it's important to discuss what kind of interest you have and how we value it, because it is different in a lot of different circumstances. Then we get into about people owing you money, whether it be alimony or child support or somebody you lent money to. We want to know who is it and what's the nature of that claim. Is it something that can be collectible? Accounts receivable for a business, for instance, is something that is a valuable asset, although not all of it can be collected. Anticipated tax refunds. If this happens quite often at the beginning of the year, if you're expecting a big tax refund, that's something I need to know about, because even though it's not money in your bank today, it's a right to have money in the future. and that right is property of the bankruptcy estate. And it is something that a trustee has an interest in. So if you're expecting to get a tax refund, then that's something we need to discuss, and we've got to make sure we disclose it and we handle it appropriately. We talk about life estates or equitable interests in real estate. Most often, sometimes someone would be named on someone else's property, they don't even know about it, and they pass away, they automatically inherit the property. That's the type of thing we're looking for. A life estate would be if you have a right to remain in a property until you die, that's a life estate. Contingent and non-contingent claims, we're really looking for, do you have the right to sue anybody? Workers' comp, auto accidents, slip and fall, those type of things that, you know, they're not worth anything to you today, but you have a right to sue anybody. That's a real claim. That's an interest of the state, something we want to talk about. Make sure you're prosecuting, make sure it's being handled correctly. If it's not, we'd like to help you with that. But we got to make sure we disclose it, and again, we treat it properly. Contingent or unliquidated claim would be someone owes you money, but it hasn't come due yet. You know, something is going to happen in the future, or subject to something else happening first. It's not money that's presently due you, but if some other event occurs, it will be due you. And we talk about intellectual property, whether it be copyrights, patents, franchises, code, copyrights, trademarks. Those are the type of intellectual property that has some value to it. In some cases more than others. A customer list, for instance. A customer list for a pharmacy is very valuable. Surprisingly, a customer list for a barbershop is valuable. Automobiles, trucks, trailers, vehicles, we want to know, do you own a vehicle? And even if you have a loan on it, you still own the vehicle. Now, if you have a lease, technically you don't own the vehicle, you have a right to use the vehicle, but we're going to want to know about the lease as well. But even if you have a loan on the car, if you owe more than the car than it's worth, you still own it, just as you own your house, even if you don't, even if you don't have any equity, you still own the house. We want to know the year, make, model, approximate value, and how much you owe on it. If there's significant equity in the property, in that vehicle, we may do some sort of blue book valuation on it to make sure that we're covered. And we're not just looking about cars and trucks, we want to know about boats, aircraft, helicopters, hovercrafts, motorcycles, ATVs. Those are the type of things we want to know about. Office furniture and supplies. If you have a computer, you have desks, you work from your home, everybody has a computer, so we want to put something down there. You want to think about it. And again, this doesn't have to be very specific at this point. It's just generally, what do you have? And we can just put computer equipment and give it a general value. We all know that a laptop you bought 6 months ago is worth almost nothing today. Machinery, fixtures, equipment, supplies. If this is a business case, then of course it's going to be more relevant than if it's an individual case. Same with inventory. If there's stock on the shelves, that's worth something. In some cases, though they're rare, we have people that actually have farms, and we want to talk about the value of the livestock, the poultry, the other animals are there. We want to know, if there's crops in the field, what the value of it, and if there's farming equipment and farming supplies and implements. Those are all things that have value and we want to disclose. Doesn't happen very often here in New Jersey, but it has happened on occasion. And then, real estate, of course, right? I mean, that's usually someone's biggest asset is, do they own real estate? And that's not necessarily just their home. Of course, we want to know about investment properties as well. We want to also know about timeshares. Oftentimes, a timeshare is a deeded property and it has a value to it. Even if it's not a deeded property, you still have a interest in a timeshare. That's property of the state we want to know about. The problem with the timeshares is always comes down to valuation. How do we figure out what the value of these are? That's always a struggle, but somehow we're going to have to be able to provide some documentation to the trustee about what the value is. And what's key to know, and we'll talk more about liabilities another time, is oftentimes the best way to find the value of timeshare is by calling up the people that you purchased it from. And if you're doing that, then I recommend at the same time find out if there's any past due maintenance fees, because those maintenance fees will reduce any equity that you may or may not have in the property. And lastly, if there's anything else, all right, so I just went generally through a list that we talk about, and it corresponds with what the bankruptcy schedule is going to ask for. But if there's anything else you can think of out there that has any value to it, let's talk about it now. And even if you think, well, you don't want to disclose it because it's property in Greece, perhaps, that someone may or may not leave you in their will. But let's talk about it, because the last thing you want is for us to come up later on. And trust me, the bankruptcy process is all about disclosure. You're signing these schedules under oath. You're going to go to a creditors meeting where we're in front of a trustee, and your creditor is going to have a right to be there. Your ex-wife, ex-husband may be there. They know things that you don't think that they know, and you got to disclose things. You got to be honest. You got to be honest with me. We got to make sure that we protect what you have, but I can't protect it if you're not honest with me. And it's not just about protecting; it's about doing the right thing here, right? We're under oath. When we go to the creditors meeting, we're going to be in front of a trustee, and the sign behind the trustee says the FBI investigates all claims of perjury, and there's fines, there's jail time, and we've all heard stories about semi-famous people that have gone to jail but not doing the right thing. So let's make sure we disclose things the right way. Talk to me about any concerns you have. Even if you think it's not an issue, let's talk about it. If that means that we don't file today and we have to wait and we have to do some planning, fine, we do that. But let's make sure we disclose all the assets you have. Thank you.